Just point to me when you
I'm
want.
going to go now.
We're just having a couple technical difficulties.
I think you have to maybe open up.
I'm waiting for the song.
Yeah, hold on. Let's try it again.
Live from the bridge at the Launchpad Studios in Huntington, New York, it's Sports Talk New York with your hosts, Mark Rosenman and AJ Carter. Sports Talk New York is sponsored in part by Cardboard Memories, Clearview, Long Island, the law firm of Decolator, Cohen, and DePrisco, the Phoenix Tube Company, PIMS Incorporated, fueling brand performance for 30 years, Prince Associates for all your insurance needs, and Soho Table Hockey. Here are your hosts, Mark and AJ.
And good Sunday morning to you if you are listening to the show live. We are on every Sunday morning at 11 o'clock. If you want to check out replays, if you're heading out the door, even if you are heading out the door, that's really no excuse because there is the 365 Sportscast family of apps, the iPhone app, the Android app, the Alexa app. But if you are out somewhere where you can't listen, just go to the 365sportscast.com website and under the schedule tab, look at weekly schedule and you can see the replay of this show in case you're going out and you're checking out some things. So basically that is it. You know, the 365 family of apps and you can check that out anytime you want on various platforms. If you are a member of a longtime listener of the show, you know we started out each week with the Major League Baseball report with John Coppinger. It's sponsored by Cardboard Memories, which is one of Long Island's most reputable memorabilia retail stores for over 29 years. The owner of Cardboard Memories, Scott Stamell, is known for his knowledge and savvy of authentic autographs, and he's been featured on HBO Real Sports with Brian Gumbel. Cardboard Memories possesses the honesty and integrity one would want and need from a memorabilia source. Cardboard Memories, always buying collections large and small. Let Cardboard Memories run your next charity fundraising auction. Call them to find out how they can help your organization at no cost. Cardboard Memories is located at 6401 Jericho Turnpike in Comac, New York. Visit them on the web at cardboardmemories.com or follow them on Facebook or Instagram. Okay, John, so there are two major items I guess we'd like to talk about this week. I'm thinking both are somewhat unpleasant, so I'm trying to figure out which one of those people
is more unpleasant.
Yeah, I guess the Matt Harvey story is the one. So let's start with Matt Harvey and the fallout afterwards. I know Terry Collins took a lot of heat, and in my opinion, it's not really called for because you know what? I get what stays in the clubhouse, this and that. However, Matt Harvey testified in open court, and he talked about all these issues. It wasn't like, Terry Collins then said, oh, and by the way, this happened also. So I'm not really, sure why Terry's getting such negative blowback on it. But what's your feeling on the Harvey testimony, and just the way the Mets handled the whole Matt Harvey situation when he was with the Mets?
Well, the way they handled it, we don't know because we never really knew what was going on. We never really knew what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, in 2013, he went out there with a bloody nose, and we were all talking about, oh, man, this is the great, tough Matt Harvey. But now we know there could have been other circumstances that led to that bloody nose. Seriously, I bring that up to kind of illustrate that, we don't know what we don't know. So that is, the Mets say, when Matt Harvey testified and said, they asked him, did the Mets have an issue with you doing cocaine? And he said, well, nobody asked me. So I think that's the most damning statement. And but who knows what the Mets, and listen, it's all good lessons for the future. The Mets are under different ownership now. So this is something I think Steve Cohen should take note of for the future. In terms of the Terry Collins thing, I listened to the interview with Sal Licata, and it just seemed that they used the Tyler Skaggs trial as an excuse to go back and dig up old stuff without using the real story, which was the Eric Kay trial and the Tyler Skaggs passing, in context. It was like it seemed like an opportunity to take another shot at Matt Harvey. I think that's why Terry Collins got as much blowback as he did.
I think we have to take a look at what the outgrowth is of the Tyler Skaggs trial and the testimony. It's not just on the Mets; it's on all of Major League Baseball. What are the lessons to be learned? What changes are coming out? Look, it turned over the rock, and you saw a lot of things. Some people suspected that, some people have written about that over the years. But you're looking now, and the question is, what has baseball generally learned from that, from the whole Tyler Skaggs thing? It goes back to who was the Indians pitcher who died from the ephedrine? That led to some changes in what happened there with the drugs and that. Every one of these comes back and looking forward, what does that mean? Look, is Matt Harvey going to face some sort of discipline? Well, we'll have to see. Supposedly baseball's going to be looking into it. But more broadly, not just Matt Harvey, everything came out. The question is, what has baseball learned from this and from Tyler Skaggs' trial that brought it to light?
Oh, and it's tough to know because Major League Baseball has their own problems that they're working through right now with the lockout. So Who knows how much attention is being paid to this at this moment when they can't even use a player's likeness on their website for some reason. So it's going to be. I think this all happened at the wrong time for baseball to really start shining a light and implementing things because they can't implement anything right now.
Totally agree. And on that note, before we let you go, Major League Baseball and the Players Association have scheduled what they refer to as almost around-the-clock negotiations for this coming week, setting a deadline for the end of the week. They've already postponed some spring training games. What is your percentage of confidence that something will get done by Friday and the camps will start opening shortly?
Considering these factions don't like each other, my percentage is no better than 50-50. And hooray, they're meeting every day this week. They could have done that any week in the past 3 months, but it seems like Major League Baseball is negotiating by paint by numbers, and it's on their schedule. And it says seriously, it's like, okay, we're going to implement a lockout to jumpstart negotiations. Then we're not going to return the Players Association's phone calls. But now, okay, the handbook says we should start negotiating now that we've canceled games. It's all sickening in my mind.
Totally.
I'm going to take the glass handful on this. I think when you look at all labor negotiations, whether it's baseball, any sport, any union, once you start having the regular day in, day out, no let-up negotiations, and you have an artificially imposed deadline of Friday or Monday, whatever it is, people get serious and settlements come about. I'll say glass is half full. I'll say they reach a settlement by Friday.
All right, we'll talk about it next week. John Coppinger heard here each and every week with the Cardboard Memories Major League Baseball Report. We're going to take a quick break. Going to talk more baseball on the other side when Preston Wilson joins us, so keep it tuned right here.
Do you own a business? When is the last time you actually had a visit from or even spoke with your insurance representative? Did your current insurance agency sell to another firm or maybe merge, leaving you without the attention you deserve? Prince Associates is a provider of commercial insurance nationwide and represents some of the finest insurance carriers in the industry. Prince Associates has been representing commercial clients since 1965, and we continue to grow and offer our personal services in a competitive and ever-changing market. If you want back the insurance relationship you deserve, reach out to us, 516-822-6550. That's area code 516-822-6550. And ask for Leith or Craig, or find us on the web at www.princeins.com.
And welcome back to Sports Talk New York this Sunday morning on the 365 Sportscast Network. Joining us now is a man who at age 17 was drafted by the New York Mets out of Bramberg Earhart High School in the first round of the 1992 Major League Baseball draft. The Baseball American 1992 High School Player of the Year. He was ranked among the top 100 prospects in baseball by Magazine 4 times between 1993 and 1998. He reached the majors in May 1998, but just 2 weeks after joining the Mets, he was traded to the Florida Marlins with 2 other minor leaguers from Mike Piazza. He would go on to have a 10-year Major League career playing for the New York Mets, Florida Marlins, Colorado Rockies, Washington Nationals, Houston Astros, and St. Louis Cardinals. It is a thrill to welcome the 2003 All-Star, the National League RBI leader, as well as the 2006 World Series champion, Preston Wilson, to Sports Talk New York. Welcome, Preston. How you doing?
Oh, great, man. After an intro like that, I'm doing really well. Thank you.
It's all you, man. So, we mentioned your time at Bramberg Earhart High School in the open. It's the same high school your stepdad, Mookie Wilson, went to. And not only that, you played for the same exact high school coach, David Horton, who coached Mookie as well. So what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of that intimacy, that knowledge of you from an early age, obviously, and the fact that he coached your stepdad?
Well, I don't really see any disadvantages. I mean, I was fortunate to have a great coach who, even though it was a really small town, he knew a lot about baseball. He had actually played in the minor leagues for the Yankees for a little bit. So he's a great baseball guy. He taught us great fundamentals. And I tell you, man, he's one of the best coaches in the history of high school baseball. He had set the record for wins in high school for baseball in the state. I think there's a college coach who may have more overall wins in baseball, but as far as state, he's got the most wins in the state. I think he's got 13 state titles he won. I mean, from my uncles, my dad, all the way through, pretty much whole family played baseball under him.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So while you're there, you set a national prep school record by hitting 7 grand slams. You also had a 13-0 record pitching with a sub-2 ERA. While that was only 30 years ago, it's obviously long before Twitter and cell phone videos. It's still enough to make you the second highest high school student taken in that draft behind Derek Jeter. Have you ever wondered, if you were in high school now, with the way we publicize every single thing that goes on, what your career might have been, and maybe the additional pressure put on you at that point?
You know what? I have thought about it, and I'm glad it happened when it did. I look at a lot of other players that came up, and some guys live up to the hype, some don't. But it's really not that player's fault. It really is a point of the media and all the outside sources projecting what a kid is going to be. And it's, I look at some of the great players from all sports who you see all the hype about them when they're in high school, and they were great at that level, but when they get to the next level, they don't play that well, and it's not that player's fault. It's the projections that everyone else put on them. So, I'm satisfied with the way it happened, and I have a lot of empathy for the players that came after me in every sport, because, man, that's a lot to have someone else tell you what you're going to do and how you're going to do, and then it's up to you to live up to it. And I don't think that's fair.
It's interesting because I'm unfortunately old enough to, remember when Mookie first came up, but I remember when you were drafted, and I remember Jerry Hussinger saying this, and he said that the fact that you knew the game so well came because he felt that you were around Mookie, but also he went out of his way to really mention the impact that being around George Foster had on you. What was that impact, and what were some of the things you learned from George Foster watching him when you were a young kid?
Well, I mean, he was a right-handed power hitter like I was. I mean, even though I was really close with my dad, when you watch someone who has a similar skill set that you have, it's easier to kind of adapt some of the things that they do. And I spent a lot of time in the cage working with George. He definitely helped me with the offensive part of my game. So when you have someone you can kind of model yourself after in a certain way, it really helps. I guess with the mentality that you're trying to take to the plate to get your job done.
So you make your way up the Mets minor league system, and was there a particular manager or coach or player who was instrumental in your development at that time?
There are a lot, man. Ron Washington was one of my A-ball managers, who he just really, he was all about perseverance, man. Go get it. Don't let anybody tell you can't do it. You might have a bad day today or bad week, whatever, but keep coming, keep bringing it every day. That was one of the great things about Washington. I think that's why you hear in the major leagues why all the players love him so much, because he will never let you get down on yourself. And the year that I played for him, I started off slow. I still ended up hitting 20 home runs and stealing 20 bases that season in the minor league season, which is pretty solid. But striking out a lot. There's a lot going on. I ended up switching positions from third base to outfield. I think the year after I played for him, but it was just one of those things, man, where, it was tough. I was playing in a ballpark that was hard to see. The infield was bad. I was getting beat up on the infield. I made a lot of errors. But just having him have that attitude every day, man, he made it easier to come in every day. A guy that a lot of people probably have never heard of, Rich Miller, who's an outfield guy. He was one of the best outfield instructors, ended up moving away from the Mets. I think when ownership changed, they kind of pushed him out. But man, what a guy! Just being able to work under him and have him be so consistent with the work and make sure that you did your work. And yes, sometimes it was annoying because you'd be out there on the field and it was hot, and then he would walk around all the fields. And I don't know if when you go to like a minor league facility, they call it a clover where there are 4 baseball fields that are back to back. So basically, if you sit behind home plate, you can walk in a small circle and kind of go to each field and see every field. Where he would do the opposite. He would go around the outfield fences and walk around the back and just kind of spy on all those outfielders doing batting practice to make sure they were working, make sure they were getting ground balls, make sure they weren't being lazy out there. And the last thing you ever wanted to hear was, all right, we got a bucket after practice, because that means he was watching you and you didn't do anything, or you were being lazy out there, and he basically hit you a whole bucket by yourself and you got to do all that work. But just guys like that who were out there, who really loved the game, who loved the players and cared enough to make sure they got the right work done. There was a bunch of guys, but those 2 guys really stand out to me.
Wow. So May of 1998, utility man Craig Paquette sprains his ankle. Bernard Gilkey was on the DL at the time. The Mets had 2 outfielders on the 40-man roster down at Norfolk, you and Jay Payton. Jay had just started throwing again after his second reconstructive elbow surgery. How did you find out that you were being called up to the majors, and what was your reaction?
I got called in my hotel room. And it was just like, hey, you okay? I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, well, you going to New York. They need somebody going to New York. And that was it. And I was just stunned into silence. And the next thing I knew, I was getting information about what flight or whatever I was going to be on. But it came as a shock, because the odd thing that happened was Edgardo Alfonso actually hurt his back. So Paquette was hurt, but then Alfonso hurt his back. So, nobody's thinking an outfielder is going to be needed, but somehow they needed an outfielder. So I ended up being the guy that went up. Yeah. So it was a shock, man. And then walking into Shea Stadium was pretty wild after growing up in that ballpark, basically watching my dad play there for, 8-10 years, however long he was there, 10 years watching him play there. And then, my first job was in the Mets, like as a promotions kid, handing out the yearbooks or the pennants or the bats or whatever it is during the season where they have a giveaway day. I was one of the kids that would go get the stuff out of the lockers and bring it out. And then when all the fans came, and they came through the turnstiles to hand it to whoever got one. But then to go through all that experience and then come there as a player, and then walk through there and then get to go into the locker room and put on a uniform. That was a whole like surreal out of body experience. It really was.
And not only for you, because as a Met fan, that was at that game, actually, you take a look at that game, May 7th, 1990, and you have to smile because you look up at the scoreboard and you see a Wilson leading off the game. You get your first hit is an infield hit on top of it. There to meet you at first base to give you a high five is your dad, Mookie, who was the first base coach at the time. You end up going 3 for 4 in RBI in that game in a 4-1 Mets win over the Cardinals. What's your fondest memory of just taking that all in and all the aspects that I just mentioned?
Oh man, I think the first thing is walking out onto that field and then kind of like realizing that I'm myself, but also being a like 8 to 10-year-old version of myself walking out of that dugout for like a father-son game. That's kind of because it's the same ballpark. Shea Stadium had not really changed. They had updated the paint a little bit. The grass is all nice and clean and all that, but it's still walking out of that same dugout that I was walking out, holding my dad's hand, going out to a father-son game. And then now I'm the person that's actually playing. And then also getting my first base hit and then shaking my dad's hand at first base. I mean, those two things are just moments that I hope I never forget.
You get to play more games as a Met at Shea, just one more. Then
right.
You go on the road, West Coast trip. And then after that trip, May 22nd, 1998, you're traded by the Mets with a couple of minor leaguers, Ed Yarnell, to the Florida Marlins for Mike Piazza. How did you find out about that trade? And granted, to be able to be traded for one of the star players in the league might cushion the blow a little bit. But here's, you had your heart set on being a Met, that same organization that you grew up with. What's your initial reaction, and how'd you find out about it, and just the general feeling that day?
My initial reaction was just shock, because I was, I was one of the Mets' top prospects at the time. If not the top, I was one of their top prospects, and I just come off a season where between A-ball and AA, I hit 30 home runs and 95 RBIs, because I hit 11 in the first half in A-ball and 19 in the second half. So that was 30. And then between the two levels, I hit 95, drove in 95 runs. So I was definitely one of the top, guys in the organization. And it was kind of untouchable. That was, you have these few guys that are like, no matter what, we're not trading them. Well, when Mike Piazza became available, I got touchable real quick. It happened in a hurry. And, it was one of those things where it's like, the Mets were my family. I grew up watching the Mets. I didn't even know the Mets were going to draft me, but when they drafted me, then again, I'm playing for the Mets. It was just one of those things where that was home for me. So now I have to figure out a whole other way to live with this whole other group of people. And, it took a lot to kind of settle in. But the weird thing about the whole circumstance is in the minor leagues, our Mets AAA was actually playing against the Marlins AAA at the time. So Norfolk was actually in Charlotte. So I played the first game of that series for the Mets against Charlotte, the Marlins. And then I played the last two games of the series for the Marlins against the Mets. So I really just switched dugouts when that trade happened.
You're the Joel Youngblood of your era, for sure. Unbelievable. But it really doesn't take you long to establish yourself. In 1999, you're the Marlins regular center fielder. You lead the team in home runs batted in as a rookie. You finished second in the National League Rookie of the Year, battling Cincinnati Reds reliever Scott Williamson. The following season, you joined the 30-30 club, 31 home runs, stealing 36 bases. You added 121 RBIs, good for 8th in the National League. As a young player, how much can you ride that confidence of those results so early in your career to really set your footing for a successful career in the majors? And conversely, we see some players struggle that never gain the confidence and have that mentality to be able to succeed. So how important were those 2 years?
Well, those years were important. I think first I really had, you say it came quick. To me, it felt like it took forever. And I'll tell you why, because when I came up at the end of 98, I didn't really play much. The Marlins had their guys who were their prospects, who were their homegrown guys. The center fielder who I was playing behind was a guy named Todd Dunwoody. So in 98, I didn't play much. And in 99, when I started that season, I wasn't the starting center fielder. It took me until I want to say March 20-something. I remember the game, we were on the road, and I ended up pitch hitting against Chandler Park, and I hit a 3-run home run opposite field, pitch hitting against Chandler Park. After that game was when I became the starting center fielder for the Marlins, and that was until March, like the end of March, like middle to end of March. So before that, I was just pitch hitting or playing against tough lefties that they wouldn't let Todd Dunwoody play against. So after I earned that spot, then it felt like, okay, things started going, because now, I had to prove that I was better than the guy that they had there. But I think more than anything, having a couple guys around me like Cliff Floyd, who was, really gaining steam at that time, good player, and Louis Castillo, having his speed at the top of the lineup, getting on base, those guys really helped me out a lot as far as being able to do the things I did as far as driving in runs. being able to drive in a lot of runs because, there weren't that many times where when I hit home runs that there were a lot of solo home runs. Louis was on, Cliff was on, Alex Gonzalez, I think, was hitting second for a while. So that kind of helped me put the numbers up. And I think more than anything, it helped me learn through some situations. But it also taught me you can't do it by yourself. You have to have people around you that are going to provide you the opportunities to get those numbers.
So after the 2002 season, you're involved in a 6-player deal, which sent you 3 other players to the Rockies for Juan Pierre and Mike Hampton. You set career highs, 282 batting average, 43 doubles, 36 home runs. You also lead the National League, 141 runs batted in. You're named to your first All-Star team. I heard you on the Major League Baseball radio last week talking about that outfield of you, Larry Walker, and Jay Payton, and how much fun it was to be part of that outfield and how good it was. As good as, you take a look at Walker's offensive numbers, his D gets overlooked a bit. What was it about playing with those two that made it so enjoyable for you?
Well, I think we were all good outfielders, and it was the first time I felt like I played with an outfielder, all good outfielders, and also just Larry Walker was just so much fun to play with. Jay was fun to play with. But it was tough playing in that big outfield. I can't imagine playing in an outfield that big without 3 guys that are really good, outfielders. I think Larry Walker could have been a center fielder. Jay Payton did play center field sometimes through his career. But it was a lot of fun. It was a situation where when you have guys who care as much about playing defense as they do about offense, it makes it a whole lot easier. You don't have those little squabbles out there. You don't have any frustrations with each other because everybody's giving their all. But yeah, you're right. Larry Walker, his defense is one of the things that are really overlooked. He's so good about positioning and knowing what each guy's going to do and paying attention to the swings on that particular day. And I think that's one of the things today's players are missing is because they have so much information with these wristbands and, that give them the plays and where to play with each player. I think they're given so much information, they're not forced to study it on their own. And I think that part of the game where when you see a player now looking at a wristband to see where he's supposed to stand because of, what a guy's going to do with a certain count or with certain situation, we had to do that on our own. We took that upon ourselves to study the book, study the charts to understand what guys did what. And Larry was really good at that.
So you traded to the Washington Nationals July of 2005 for pitcher Zach Day, outfielder J.J. Davis. You lead the teams in home runs, RBIs during the second half of the season, finishing with 25 and 90 respectively. It's another stop with yet another pretty high-profile personality manager. Some of the others you've played for to that point, Bobby V, Jimmy Leland, Clint Hurdle, and now Frank Robinson. You go on as well to play for Tony La Russa. What was Frank like? And of all the high-profile guys that managed you, which is the manager that was the best fit for you?
Okay, I'm glad you asked me that because Frank Robinson was a great manager. And I understand he may have had his struggles at the beginning of his managing career, managing pitchers. But Frank was a great manager. And I honestly believe, and I will say this until I leave this earth, Frank Robinson deserved better. Because the situation with him there with Bowden was terrible. Bowden would have players go past Frank to go to him because they're unhappy about where they're hitting in the lineup. And then Bowden would force Frank to change the lineup because some guy went upstairs and complained, whether it was Jose Guillen or somebody else was upset about where they're hitting in the lineup. He would actually force Frank to change the lineup and cut Frank's legs out from under him. That team had so much undiscipline, it was all Bowden's fault. Because you had guys like Esteban Loaiza, who I saw as a starting pitcher come to a game 45 minutes before the game started, which is unheard. Like, you can't imagine how crazy it is to have your starting pitcher roll up to the game 45 minutes before the game started. But that, Bowden created that type of atmosphere. You could see it in his life, the way he lived, like all the scandals that he went on with the paper, the things with the Nationals, with him, taking, cuts from team players in the Dominican, him and Jose Rios, he created such a dysfunctional place that when I got there, after 2 weeks of me going there, I knew that team wasn't going to win because there's no way you can have that much chaos in an organization with a guy who's running a team and then have a manager that really has no power because the GM is cutting his legs out from under him with the players. So you had players who, like I said, may not really know the history of the game and know Frank Robinson, and they didn't respect him, and it was all because of Bowden, who didn't respect him in the way that he went about his business. So to me, Frank deserved better. As far as the best fit, I think the Cardinals may have been the best fit simply because from top to bottom it was run well, and they were about baseball the way that I like baseball. It was about accountability. It's not about being great. It's about standing up for doing your job, being there, and being accountable for when it's time to get it done.
No, that's shocking about Frank Robinson because he was such. I know his time with the Giants. He was such a disciplinarian. Time with the Indians, and you're right. I mean, it's situational, and that's why sometimes people look at managers and it's the situations they're put in that causes them to either be successful or unsuccessful. So that's a very interesting take on Frank Robinson. I appreciate that. That season, the Nationals would call up a 20-year-old third baseman while you were there. He'd go on to play his entire 16-year career there. He just announced his retirement last week. What was your first impression when you saw Ryan Zimmerman when he was brought up?
I mean, you knew the kid could play. He had this quiet confidence about him, and I think when they called him up that September, he hit like close to 400 or something like that. I mean, he was just quietly going about his job. He wasn't afraid. You knew he thought he belonged there. And, he's one of those kids that I wish I could have seen play more. I saw him from the other side. But, yeah, you knew he was going to be a good one.
You mentioned your time with the Cardinals, and we, anyone that talks about baseball, they talk about the Cardinals way. And you get there, and you get to your first postseason, 13 postseason games. You appear in all 5 World Series games. You hear from athletes so many times in every sport that it's not so much the individual accomplishments. They're great, but you play to win a championship. For someone who fought through lots of injuries, multiple teams, some good, some bad, what did that first taste of postseason and the eventual World Series win mean to you?
The first taste scared the death out of me at first. You get there and you realize now this is that moment of everything you want, and then you realize how much different it is than anything you've ever been through. So that's kind of scary. But other than that, man, it was a time to just do your part, do whatever I could to help the cause. And, I was honestly, I was past my prime at that point. My legs were bad. My knees were killing me. I'd already had, I think, 3 knee surgeries at the time. But when you get in that environment, I realized that the Cardinals weren't asking for more than I was able to give. And I think that's one of the great things of that era that the Cardinals did is when they went out and got a player, they didn't get a player hoping that he was somebody else. They got the player that was the closest thing to what they needed. And they needed another right-handed power batter slugger to be around Albert because they had Edmonds. Roland's shoulder was bad. But they needed another right-handed power bat. So whenever Roland was out, or whatever the situation was, that another right-handed bat, where once you got past Albert, you couldn't just load up the lineup with lefties and then get through because I always hit left-handed pitching well. Mm-hmm. So I was what they needed, and I played good defense. I was still running well enough to play good defense because they put me on the corners. I really had to play center field, and it worked out well. And it was really one of those situations where I wasn't supposed to play as much as I did in the World Series, but I think there was a play in the first game. A ball went down the right field line, and it ended up being a triple. And I think Tony thought it should have only been a double. Encarnacion, who's a really good friend of mine, knew him for a long time. I haven't talked to him in years, but he went down in the corner and didn't really go at it as aggressively as I guess Tony thought he should have. And I ended up starting and playing the rest of the World Series. It's just one of those things where you realize your work kind of shows up. And, I feel like I took pride in my defense my whole career, and that showed up in that situation. And one other thing that nobody in the world probably would have ever guessed, and I know I didn't, I actually got a sack bunt down in the World Series. But it was only done because Tony knew I could do it. I always took pride in it. And even though I was a power hitter, hit cleanup most of my career during batting practice or even in the minor leagues, I did get my bunts done. I would go out early for early work, get bunts done. So it was something that I did well, but it was something that I wasn't really asked to do that much, especially later in my career. But they knew that I could do it, and I ended up getting the sack button down, and that run actually ended up scoring in the World Series. So it was one of those things where, yes, it's scary, but it also is a thing where anything that you can do, you're going to be able to have a chance to do it in the World Series or in the playoffs. At some point, it's going to come off that whether that skill you've had that you should have been polishing is going to show up, and you're going to have to prove it at some point.
Just to clarify for you 20-something-year-olds that are listening out there, a sack bunt is when a batter gives himself up and a runner from first base gets to second base because of that sacrifice. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It really is.
Yes, wait till we tell you about the phone booths back then, kid.
A couple of more things before we let you go here. So you finished your pro career right here on Long Island with the Ducks under a teammate of your dad's, Gary Carter, who was the manager of the Ducks at the time. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is there was so much talk this week on social media. One minor leaguer actually posted his W-2 form and showed how little money he made in the minors. And I'm kind of torn on this because you take a look at some other professions. Doctors spend tons of money on med school. Some eventually don't even become doctors. They wash out because they just couldn't do it. Cops and firemen, have apprenticeships, different trades, plumbers, electricians serve an apprenticeship where they're not really making a lot of money. Teachers take out student loans to get their degrees to become teachers and don't really see that, down the road. But I know at that point money probably wasn't an issue, but why did you decide to play for relatively no money in an independent league at that time in your career?
I wanted to play. I wanted to play. And I will say this. I feel like the comparisons like between lawyers and doctors and apprentices and stuff, there is always going to be an opportunity for you to have a job when it comes to a lawyer or a policeman. Like the job is there waiting. It's up to you whether you're good at it or not. That's a difference. But the job is there waiting. In baseball, there may not be a job there waiting. Just because you go through the minor league doesn't mean you're going to be a Major League Baseball player. With your apprentice, like the job, it may not be where you want it to be, but there's going to be a job somewhere. In the minor leagues, you're not guaranteed a job. And I think that's the difference between those scenarios when you talk about other jobs as opposed to sports. I mean, there's some players who've been career minor leaguers. And until their fifth or sixth year, they're finally making enough money. But for me, I wanted to play. I wanted to see if I could, play well enough to maybe, be an add-on guy for some team down the run. Now that didn't end up happening for me, but that was why I played. I played because I love playing and I wanted to play.
No, I totally agree with you that they do have some, but also, and again, one of the points you made on the Major League Baseball Network, it's something we talk about here a lot, where, on social media, where people will trash a player and say, this player sucks, that player sucks. We understand they are the best of the best if they're in the major leagues. And, listen, I can talk from experience where, I got in, to bat against Ricky Bonus. And my good friend Lenny Harris told him after he threw me 2 fastballs, and like the second one I fouled off, so I'm feeling all my chest is pumped out. And Lenny says, throw him a Christmas present. And then all of a sudden, this ball is headed right to my head. I bail, the thing drops off the table right into the catcher's mitt, strike 3, and Lenny's just cracking up at third base. But yeah, I mean, people just don't get it. They don't get it, and that's one of the things we hate, when people do that. You're laughing as hard as Lenny. You're laughing as hard as Lenny did.
because Lenny and I are good friends. I call him Coop. Like that's just one of the things all old time baseball thing. Lenny is hilarious. Yes. So that's one of the things people don't understand. People don't understand how hard it is to get a baseball. And I'll give you this analogy. You will see and have seen guys go from baseball to play other sports. I had a friend named Vernon Morency. He played baseball in the minor leagues with the Rockies. He ended up going to Oklahoma State to play a running back. He played running back in the NFL for I think it was Green Bay for a couple of years. They were with the Vikings. He made it to the NFL as a running back after being a minor league baseball player. You don't see baseball players come from other sports to be a baseball player.
That's true. Absolutely.
It does not happen.
Absolutely. So lastly, you were great on the, we're not going to talk lockout because that's just going to get us all upset. You were so good on the air. Any shot of you coming back somewhere? Because I envision a great show, even if it might even be on this network. I think you and your dad should do a show called Good Old Mr. Wilson's. And I think it would be awesome to have both of you. I think there's a show there.
You know what? That would be cool to have a radio show. And actually, I was thinking about trying to get back in this year. I've been talking to the, to the Marlins here, and I don't know what they're going to do with their broadcast staff yet. Hopefully, I saw something about Tommy Hutton possibly coming back. So hopefully there will be like a rotation, and I can be in that rotation of guys that are calling games in the booth. But if not, I definitely am. Open to looking into the radio thing. That would be pretty cool. I think it would be good to be able to reach an audience and have an audience that I'm with every day or however many days to kind of talk to them and talk about the baseball and share the game with them and, have some fun.
Awesome. Preston, thanks so much for your time this morning. Listen, I love Mike Piazza. I'm not going to lie, one of my favorite Mets of all time. I just wish they had found some way to keep you out of the deal, as I would have loved to seen you play a lot more for the Mets. Where's the best place for people to keep up with you on social media these days?
Oh man, I'm around at on Twitter. It's at 44 Club 3030. No, that's at Preston Wilson 44. Sorry, at Preston Wilson 44 on Twitter, and I think on Instagram is PJRW4. Yeah.
Awesome, Preston. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of the day, and hopefully we'll catch up soon.
All right, thank you.
You got it. Preston Wilson, 2006 World Champ, back with Russ Cohn and Soho Table Hockey Report next.
The Phoenix Tube Company Incorporated is among the country's leading manufacturers of structural ornamental stainless steel tubing, rectangles, squares, and processed flat bars. The company takes pride in its everyday commitment to quality and customer service. The philosophy of the company has been and continues to be to support the growth of the stainless tube market through distribution and service centers throughout the country. Ornamental and structural stainless steel tubing is used for a wide variety of aesthetic and mechanical products where superior finish and corrosion resistance are required. Some products manufactured include tubing for mirror bracket arms, boat rails and ladders, washroom grab bars, swimming pool rail products, medical equipment, automotive step bars and trimming, as well as structural framing for food processing equipment. For a quote or for more information on how the Phoenix Tube Company can meet your ornamental and structural stainless steel tubing needs, visit them on the web at phoenixtube.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-526-2124.
And welcome back to Sports Talk New York this Sunday morning. If you're listening to us live, if you are listening to us on the replay and you just happen to stumble across us, basically you want to go to the 365sportscast.com website, check out schedule. You'll see when we're on live, which is every Sunday at 11, and then when our replays air throughout the week. So it's a good place to catch up. It's time now for the NHL Report with Russ Cohn, sponsored by our friends over at Soho Table Hockey. What's table hockey, you say? Some of us might have,
table hockey.
There you go. Some of us might have grown up with rod hockey or bubble hockey or even air hockey tables. Soho Table Hockey is embracing the nostalgia of those old tabletop games, designed a whole new board for the future, handcrafted with designer wood, a state-of-the-art playing surface, unbendable rods, energy-absorbing walls. This is a table hockey game that players age 8 to 80 can enjoy. Even better, the exceptional quality and design allows the game to stand up the intensity of tournaments, which is why Soho Table Hockey is the #1 choice of championship players throughout North America. Visit SohoTableHockey.com to learn more. Start your order on a custom game. You can choose your wood, a centerized logo, and even the team matchups. Go ahead, drop the puck. You'll love Soho Table Hockey so much you won't be able to stop playing. All right, Russ, some sad news in the world of hockey. Emile Francis, 95 years old. I mean, up until I think it was 2 years ago when they retired Hatfield's number. I mean, you marveled at the energy this guy had. We've had him on our show. Basically, the inventor of the modern day goalie glove. Just an innovator. Just tell the audience what Emile Francis meant to the game of hockey, especially in the New York tri-state area.
Yeah, I mean, I've had many phone conversations with him. They always went longer than you would expect, and we really were just very friendly. And he was the conduit between the Rangers past and the present. And I feel like now they've lost something there because he didn't just talk to sort of hear his own voice. He really was like a steward of the game and really that franchise. The fact is, like in this era, can you imagine somebody being behind the bench and trying to GM? And he said that was like a 24-hour around-the-clock job and 12 months a year. Like it didn't. So that took a grind on him, and he really, he was in there for a long time in that spot, in and out. That's pretty amazing. The funny thing about the goalie thing is that he was a great baseball player, and he played for the North Battleford Beavers. I have something on it on Sportstalkny.com. He really gets into baseball and where he was in the Canadian Armed Forces, but his first baseman glove was what he used initially as a trapper.
Yep.
So, that's one of the things that we were talking about being an innovator. It's just the guy, anytime I spoke to him, I always got to a different depth with him, even talking about the death of Terry Sawchuk, how we had to go and identify the body. It was very painful to him to talk about, but we talked about everything. So he just, told me about it, and it was just unbelievable to kind of, relive that, because that was really like a shock. You don't expect somebody from a team to have to go and actually go to a New York hospital like the basement and do that. So it just tells you what kind of guy he really was. And by the way, even on a side from Terry Sawchuk, he was a baseball player too and played in Winnipeg. So a lot of these guys played and got extra money playing baseball in Canada, during the summer. So Emil, one of the best coaches. I think he has the most wins, right, as a Ranger coach. He just a class guy. Just he was a goalie, like you said, himself. When he was with the Blues, right towards the end there, I had this article up on Sportsology. In 1983, the Blues did not send anybody to the draft, and he was stunned. So he ended up at the draft for a different club. He was the GM of the Hartford Whalers. And the St. Louis Blues sent nobody to a draft, like empty table. It will never happen again, but it happened then. And so just so many things have happened in this guy's life. And the first time I ever spoke to him, I had to get past the Hatfield, the Rattel and Park trade. I had to do that. I told him I was mad at him as a young man, and I really needed to understand it. And he went and he explained everything, and I totally understood it and never thought about it again as far as being mad at him. But I was mad at him for a long time, and it's the one time where you could actually talk to somebody about it and get real answers about it. And that was, that really helped me, actually, because that was something I carried for a bunch of years.
When you take a look at his legacy, and it goes back, he took over a Ranger team in the 60s as an absolute joke, and he brought to respectability as a coach. Then he went on to general manager. When you look back at his legacy, will he be remembered more as a general manager or as a coach, and how much will it be affected by the fact that it took so long, for the Rangers to actually come back and finally win a cup?
I think it's more as a GM because there's a few things he did. First thing is he made sure the Rangers were never on the road even though they could have had home games in the playoffs because, elephant excrement went through the ceiling into his office, and he screamed at management and said, it's either the circus or me. We can't have this happen again, getting supplanted out of the Garden. That was a big deal. It was a big deal when they signed Tim Horton. That was something that really did help put the club back on the road to respectability because Horton was one of the strongest guys in the NHL and still pretty good even as a New York Ranger. So that was something. And again, look, the guy, he basically would tell you if you spoke to him long enough, he had contracts in drawers. He was always tampering. He was always, but what he also did do was he got Rod Gilbert and Jean Rattel out of Canada and away from the Canadians, which in those days, based on the territorial rules, was really almost an impossibility. So I do think it's more as a GM.
Awesome, Ross. We'll speak next week as the trade deadline approaches, and we'll start figuring out who's pretty much eliminated from playoff competition. Because by the end of this week, we'll and we might even have that now. But we'll talk next week trade deadline and where people stand in the standings. Russ Cohen heard here in every week with the Soho Table Hockey NHL Report. We'll take a quick break. On the other side, that moment you've all been waiting for, Sunday Papers, and then the NBA and NFL Report. So keep it tuned right here to Sports Talk New York.
Decolator Cohen and DePrisco, LLP, is pleased to introduce their website, policeofficersrighttosue.com, as an educational and informative site designed to instruct members of the law enforcement community of their civil rights in line-of-duty accidents. Many law enforcement members are not aware of their rights to sue and fail to bring lawsuits within a specific time frame, thereby forfeiting their ability to seek rightful compensation against those parties that cause officers to be injured. PoliceofficersRightToSue.com provides successful past results of line-of-duty lawsuits. These examples range from officers being provided with inadequate equipment, RMP accidents, slip and falls, and station house mishaps. If any law enforcement member has a question regarding a potential lawsuit, they can contact DCD at policeofficersrighttosue.com or at 1-800-901-1LAW. That's policeofficersrighttosue.com or 1-800-901-1LAW.
You can read it in the Sunday papers.
You know what that means? It means it's time for AJ's Sunday Papers. AJ, what do you got for us?
Well, today's Sunday Papers is out of Boise, Idaho. And, when you buy a house, a used house, a resale, you learn a lot of things about the previous owner. Some good, some bad, some they don't want to know. This is the case of a woman named Melissa Brote who bought a house in Boise for his son and started remodeling it. And there was a bedroom that had a suspicious wall. It was shingled and then painted over. And with the trepidation, she's wondering what was under the shingles. She tried to redecorate. He took the shingles down and found that the entire wall underneath the shingles had 1,600 baseball cards glued to the plaster. They're from the 70s and the 80s, and the previous owner said, it was in the 1980s. He was a kid. He was obsessed with baseball. They were going to wallpaper one of the walls with excess baseball cards. And you look now, unfortunately, cards don't really have much value as cards because they've been plastered and they're in shape. So what is she going to do with it? What would you do with a wall of baseball cards? She's offered anybody who wants the wall, come and take it out, and you can get it. I don't know if there have been any takers, but if you want to get a wall of baseball cards, 1,600 cards, contact Melissa Broke, Bureau DT in Boise, Idaho.
Yeah, the cards range. First of all, there's no real great rookie cards. On top of it, they're glued against the wall, so they're not in great condition. They're not in mint condition, obviously, if you can't peel them off the wall. They actually went back and found the original owner, the person who had put them up there as a teenager, which is pretty interesting. And he goes, yeah, it's cool, but I don't want them. So, all right, it's time now for the Capco NBA report with Kyle Talbot. Even though it's spring, winter, but obviously, you know what? I'm going to even put a different spin on this. The 2002 Series 1 Topps baseball cards are out, so that means spring will be here before you know it. It's time to get your windows and doors ready to let the fresh air in, the bugs out with the Clearview retractable screen. The Clearview retractable screen comes with a lifetime warranty and the patented speed reducer so it won't snap back. You get the luxury of a screen door and a sleek low-profile design without the hassle of a bulky storm door or sliding screen door. Call 631-440-1100 for a free estimate. That's 631-440-1100 or visit them on the web at clearviewlongisland.com. All right, Chaim, I guess, NBA All-Star Weekend, the highlight so far, I guess, of this Knicks season is they have a guy who does well in the slam dunk competition, but, this team looks like, I hate to say it because I like kids, but it looks like this team is quitting on their coach. What do you make of that?
It does. We spoke last time about how there's typically this Tibbs burnout around year 3 or 4 of a Thibodeau regime, and it came really early for these guys. It's the weirdest thing, I guess the most striking thing, is that there seems to be some kind of disconnect between the front office and the head coach in terms of the trades being made, and the personnel being provided for Coach Tibbs is not at all a Thibodeau personnel. The rotation doesn't make sense, and that's probably the biggest criticism of Tibbs right now. Isn't that the players quit necessarily, it's that the rotation is awful in terms of how the minutes are allocated and who's getting a look. Look, at this point in the season, even if they're fighting for a playoff spot, and I think Tibbs kind of acknowledged it last summer, he said, all right, nobody's promised anything anymore. You got to earn the minutes, pure meritocracy. But, to have a Kemba Walker, your big offseason signing, and have him just glued to the bench, and then he comes off, first week he's out of the doghouse. He wins, Eastern Conference Player of the Week. That's like, okay, what are we doing here, Coach? Cam Reddish is your big flashy signing, and he can't crack the rotation. Evan Fournier is getting a ton of minutes, even though he can't play D, and you're all about D, but now the defense is awful. There's just some serious dysfunction in terms of the personnel and the style of play that they want to play. And in that regards, yeah, he might be in trouble. If he and Worldwide West, if he and Leon Rose are not on the same page, then I think that Leon Rose has a little more staying power than Coach Thibodeau does. I don't know about it. I know that players are not being used in the way that best accentuates what they do. Julius Randle has made a serious regression, and he's playing disgruntled and not happy. And it's really clear from his body language he does not like what he's doing right now. And I think that at this point, the best thing they could have done would have been addition by subtraction, get rid of the disgruntled players, get players who are young, who want to buy in, who want to be in the gym. That was what this team was last year, and that seems to have died. And I think that's probably the biggest picture of the next.
He has players like that. He's not playing them. He can 1 minute for Obi Toppin, 1 minute for Emmanuel, 1 minute for Grimes. You look at the players, they have players. You look at a coach, and if a coach coaches the game right, he starts from the back end and works forward. Who do I want on the floor at the end of the game? Who are my players in the fourth quarter? Who are my players in the last 2 minutes? Mm-hmm. And he doesn't seem to have that done right. He seems to. That's why they're collapsing at the end of the games. They're building up big leads, whether 3 25-point leads or something, blown out 4 in the fourth quarter. And he hasn't figured out the back end first to get you there and come out. And that, to me, lands squarely on the coach. If he's stubborn about using his players, if he's stubborn what he has, it's easier to change the coach than it is to change the roster. So as much as he's coach of the year last year and people love him, you got to wonder, look, Leon Rose and Worldwide West are not dummies. They see a handwriting wall and know and figure out, what do they have to do? The question is, when do they do it?
Well, yeah, and the big X factor here, at least from where I'm sitting, is how patient is Jimmy Dolan going to be? Because if you look at the other side of, I guess, his Garden ownership, the Rangers were a team that were ascending. They're the young team. They got all the pieces, and snuck in. They were there. They were around. They're on their way up, and yet you got rid of a relatively successful head coach, a relatively successful and appreciated league-wide GM. That we got to make some changes. We got to toughen up. The Tom Wilson incident in the end of last season really kind of stuck with him, and it's worked. But he's pretty trigger happy with the Rangers on the other side. Is he willing to stick with Leon Rose, even if the pieces are there? We're getting younger. Juice seems like a nice piece. RJ seems to be coming around. Obi, he's showing flashes if he can ever get the minutes. Cam Reddish is a young piece. They got draft picks. Are they willing to stick with the old regime long enough to see if this works? Or, is he going to pull the trigger or just clean house like he did over at the Rangers and, start from scratch? I don't know how invested Jimmy Dolan is on the Knicks side or on the Rangers side. He was really short on the trigger. He was really quick on the trigger, I should say. And it seemed to work. Now, I don't think he's going to do that with the Knicks. I think he's gotten way too much blowback in terms of his involvement with the Knicks in the past. But yeah, it's something is going to have to change. And this past couple of weeks with a 20-point lead being blown, particularly that loss against the Nets recently to absolutely nobody on the roster. If Tim survives that, I'd like to think he's probably going to survive at least another year. Because if he was gone, it would have been then. But yeah, there are some things that need to seriously be ironed out between front office, head coach, personnel, and the way those minutes are allocated. Or else the Knicks are not only are they in trouble because this season it's a wrap. They are in trouble this season. But in terms of moving forward, in terms of the outlook, in terms of knowing what you have, they're going to be in trouble long term.
All right, Chaim, we appreciate it. Chaim Palber heard here each and every week with the NBA Report. We're going to close it out with a commercial word from our friends at PIMS, and then next week we'll be back. If you missed any part of it, you can check out the 365sportscast.com website. Look at weekly schedule to find out when the show will be replayed, and you can also check out the sportstalknylive.com website if you just want to hear the Preston Wilson interview. We'll see everyone next week. Enjoy the day wherever you are, wherever you're listening, and we hope to have you back here next week.
If you're a company looking to increase your visibility, to make sure your promotional materials get packaged in the most attractive way and distributed most efficiently, then you need to call in PIMS. Whether you're launching a new product and need to assemble customized influencer packages or looking for a more efficient way to manage your inventory and collateral, PIMS involvement helps maximize the impact of your brand's performance. For more than 30 years, PIMS has been helping companies get their message out to the right people.